Well, we certainly want to give you a warm welcome today to another Bible study program. We're trying out this new background, and we're kind of tickled and kind of happy about it. But we need a little feedback on what we should do to kind of make use of it. And you're welcome to communicate with WCET about it all. Now, I suspect these programs will be played this December. And we're happy to, shall we say, get some fresh programs to you. We acknowledge sometimes why we play some reruns, don't we? And sometimes you might say, oh, I've already seen that one before. But the belief is that to review it again only brings additional light and spiritual exposure. And so we're not totally against reruns. Now, I could mention that, I'm still growing out this here. And I don't know whether to apologize for that or not. I personally don't find it to be the most wonderful thing in the world, but some of my family members kind of like it, and they don't see it very often, so they don't want me to let it go. But very likely in the new year, you won't see all this on here, and that'll be a thing of the past. But anyway, we wanted to talk today about you may remember how when the Israelites went into the Promised Land, there was Jericho that, shall we say, collapsed on its face before the advancing armies of Israel. And I guess people have pointed out before that when you have some victories, that's a hard thing to sustain, because it's kind of like you get all puffed up and you think, well, I've had this big victory, so now it's going to be smooth sailing as we proceed in from here. And that is sort of what the Israelites thought when they had the victory at Jericho. It's kind of like, hey, nobody can stop us now. And the weird thing of it is that there was sin that stopped them, their own sin. What had happened is this one man named Achan, when he saw all these Babylonian treasures and these wonderfully expensive robes, Babylonian robes in the, shall we say, in the plunder in Jericho, he took it and he hid it in underneath the ground of his tent. That was in direct contrast to the instructions that the Lord had given to his people. And so there was sin, kind of like, let's say, the root of sin and rebellion and greed and covetousness and hiding of it all is now growing down into the Israelite army's experience. And so what they did was the next obstacle or barrier as they're going to be going into the Promised Land is this one city called Ai. And they thought, that little town, let's just send a smaller number of military types there, and, well, they'll make quick work of Ai, and it'll be okay. What happened was, because of the sin of Achan, the Lord's blessing was now removed from his people Israel. And so we read that it says, when they returned to Joshua, they said, not all the people will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary all the people, for only a few men are there. I was telling you, they're a little puffed up, a little overconfident after this whole experience of Jericho, and the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. And archaeologists tell us the walls of Jericho, they burst outward, and so the people could climb up them like a ramp at an airport, you could say, and they could go in and then take Jericho. But then they said regarding Ai, the next city, do not weary all the people, for only a few men are there. So about 3,000 men went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai. Oh, talk about a surprise. The men of Ai basically bring defeat to the army of Israel, and it's like, oh no, here we are in the Promised Land, and Jericho has fallen with a mighty thud. 'Tis true. And Ai is supposed to fall next with an equally mighty thud, but it doesn't cooperate. And so this is a very public thing. Ai defeats Israel. It says, so about 3,000 men went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted and became like water. It's kind of like, oh, after a great victory like Jericho, now you have this very public, surprising defeat when it comes to the next city, which is Ai. Oh, what lessons we can learn from all of that. It's kind of like just because you have one grand victory doesn't mean that the next obstacle is going to fall, shall we say, on his face before you. The men of Ai came out and they clobbered the Israelites with a mighty blow. And of course, word's going to get out. And this is a crisis for Joshua and the entire army. It's kind of like the place is seething with resistance, and they're going to join together and snuff out the Israelite army now that Ai has defeated the Israelites. And so surprising things that go along with, shall we say, walking with the Lord. And we remind you that sin is like a deadly enemy. If you had a house that was built nicely, sin is like the termites that will eat away at the central portions of these foundation beams and things. And that's what's happening here. Well, what Joshua does is he says to his people, okay, somebody amongst you has done something, shall we say, noticeably incorrect. Now you have to come forward. And finally, Achan came forward and said, it's true. I've stolen all these treasures and the Babylonian robes, and I've hidden them in the bottom of my tent. And then Joshua says, okay, well, go and dig it up, present it before the Lord. It's in direct contrast to the particulars that the Lord has laid out. And so that's what happens. They confess the sin, and it's kind of like it gets kind of like dealt with in the proper ways. And now they're going to go back to Ai. We're going to have to go back to it in a different way, from a different angle. But when we look at what comes next, we know in the background there's this humiliating defeat, which has huge kind of like consequences for the forward advancement of the Israelite armies into the Promised Land. Promised Land is just overfilled with these many kingdoms, and all they do all day long is they practice killing, And so they're going to come up and they're going to just demolish Joshua and his army if they can. So now what we read about next is they go to Ai, and they're going to, basically they're going to trick the people of Ai. What it amounts to is they're going to pretend to retreat before the advancing military people out of Ai, and basically empty out the city if they can, and then they're going to have these back people that are going to come into the city, set it on fire. Strategies and efforts to kind of like get these enemies to make a misstep. Why, that didn't just start up 100 years ago. I mean, that's been going on for thousands of years. So that's what we read. And so it says, when the king of Ai saw this, that is, that the Israelite army was retreating, he and all his men, the men of the city, hurried out early in the morning to meet Israel in battle at a certain place overlooking the Arabah. But he did not know that an ambush had been set against him behind the city. Joshua and all Israel let themselves be driven back before them, and they fled into the desert. All the men of Ai were called to pursue them. And they pursued Joshua, and they were lured away from the city where they had been. Not a man remained in Ai or Bethel who did not go after the Israelites' army. They left the city open and went in pursuit of Israel. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Hold out toward Ai the javelin that is in your hand, for into your hand I will deliver the city." So Joshua held out his javelin toward Ai. And as soon as he did this, the men in the ambush rose quickly from their position and rushed forward. And remember, the gate has been left wide open. They entered the city and captured it and quickly set it on fire. The men of Ai looked back, and they saw the smoke of the city rising against the sky. We're talking a game changer now. It's a game changer. What is the game changer? The smoke. The smoke that's rising up from the city. You know? And really this world was like Ai, and they thought they had snuffed out the light, at least reduced it down by 90%, and it was like it's going to be just a matter of time, and they're going to snuff out the light completely. And you say, what was the light? Well, the light was the people of Israel, and as well as the worship of Israel. And by the time that Jesus was born into this world, why, Israel as a people had been reduced by about 85%, and their worship in the temple had been reduced by about 85% as well. And so what you have is a situation where the darkness is rising up, just like you have here. It's going to snuff out the light, snuff out the people of the light as well. And it's kind of like the whole world is looking on as this is happening. But then it says the men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising against the sky. I mean, this speaks volumes now. This is a game changer. It's like the Israelites were in retreat and running for their lives, and shall we say trying to hide under bushel baskets here and there and everywhere until we see this smoke rising up against the sky. And that says to the people of Ai, you're in trouble. And that says to the people of Israel, now you can turn back and start advancing against, let's say, the hordes of darkness that are pursuing you. And you ask, well, what's really the game changer? Well, the game changer is Jesus being born in Bethlehem, because now you have the Messiah of the entire universe who now exists here upon the kind of like the stage of life in the theater of this world. That's highly crucial. That's highly important. And with him, it's like, oh, now God's people can be pushing forward, and now the world of darkness has to start to make a big retreat. And that's really what's happening. And so when you say, well, what's the game changer? Well, back in that day, it was this pillar of smoke that was rising up against the sky. What does it say? In Joshua chapter 8 and verse 20, it says, the men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city, that's their own city, rising against the sky. And that means their city is starting to be destroyed. And they are ways away from their city. It's kind of like, oh, I wish I hadn't left the city, because I wish I hadn't left the gates wide open, because now I see that smoke is rising from my city. It says, but they had no chance to escape in any direction, for the Israelites who had been fleeing toward the desert had turned back against their pursuers. That, I would say, is the book of Acts. You know, the book of Acts is really when Jesus' followers now start pushing against the hordes of darkness, and it's all on the basis of such things as a crucifixion of their Messiah, but then the resurrection of their Messiah, and it's kind of like on the basis of this we can now push against the hordes of darkness. It says, the men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising against the sky. It's kind of like a visual display of something that they had not thought was ever going to happen to them. And we have to realize it that way. It's kind of like, for the most part, people sin boldly because they think, I can do this. I can do this and get away with this. And so it's kind of like that's what goes on. The city of Ai had been emptied out by a bunch of people who felt that now's our chance to snuff out the light and to destroy the armies of Israel. And so they sort of like in a kind of like a thrust of enthusiasm and a pell-mell desire to snuff out the light, to prevent the people of God from taking over in the promised land. They left their city empty, and then now smoke is rising from that city. You know, death would proceed like, let's say, a giant, let's say, a steamroller, like a giant freight train, and it proceeds forward. But then, a surprise of all surprises, there's this pillar of smoke that rises up from the kingdom of dead, and it says, somebody has escaped from our grasp, and we're not pleased about it. And furthermore, this is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who has escaped from the kingdom of dead. It's like he was in our safe, and we did not tell him the code. We did not tell him how to turn the dial. He just, like a stick of dynamite, has blasted a hole in the side of our kingdom. And it's kind of like huge surprise. Oh, this is a game changer. Now all of us who gather around Jesus, our Messiah, why we, in a sense, why we escaped the crunching sound that the steamroller of death makes as it progresses across the landscape of time. I'm telling you, this is a game changer. Just like it says the smoke of the city was rising against the sky, but they, that's the army of Ai, had no chance to escape in any direction. For the Israelites who had been fleeing, that's a description of the Israelites before the victory of Christ. They had been fleeing toward the desert. Now they turned back against their pursuers. And now we have these people in the book of Acts who are saying, kingdom of death, you must release now your captives. And kingdom of darkness, you must now give back. Almost like in the book of Jonah, where the whale is told, burst forth with your captive so that he can be seen by the light of day and healed up. And that's really what's happening in the book of Acts. Kind of like we too in this day have to say, darkness, give back your captives. O grave, give back your captives. And they have no ability to stop this powerful forward movement of, let's say, God's marching kingdom of light. And so that's really what we have to do, sort of take charge and do what's right. You know, that's what General Schwarzkopf used to say. He used to say, you got to take charge and do what's right. I'm telling you, that's a military commander telling the Christian teachers and preachers, take charge and do what's right. It's kind of like we do have this big new reality that has been brought into this world of ours, with Jesus dying on the cross, then rising from the dead in mighty power against all odds, and now we have to take charge and do what's right. It's almost like we have to command the army of Ai, move back, move back on the basis of this great new reality that has been introduced into this world situation. On the basis of that, move back, folks, and get out of the way and give back your captives. Give them back, I say. Sort of like the whale that had swallowed Jonah could talk to the whale and say, I say, give back your captive. I want to see him. And then the captive is brought forth upon the shoreline of this world. And then we say, okay, now we're going to work with that set free individual and help them so they can now do what should be done. And I'm telling you, every day you rise from your slumber is a day when you can be pushing back the forces of darkness and untying the captives so that they can, shall we say, be set about a good task. You know, I would say on the basis of that cloud that was rising up against the sky, darkness can be pushed back and the light can be extended into new territory. First, we looked at the defeat of the Israelite army, such a surprise defeat by the people of Ai. And I would say that's a picture of this world before Christ was born and before Christ did his kind of like mighty wonders, and God did his mighty wonders through Christ by letting him die under the curse and the judgment, and now letting him rise with mighty power from the kingdom of the dead, from the forces of darkness that had held him for 3 days and 3 nights, portions of which he was held captive. But now it says, the men of Ai looked back and they saw the smoke of the city rising against the sky. But they had no chance to escape any longer in any direction, for the Israelites who had been fleeing toward the desert had turned back against their pursuers. Really, we have to understand the basis for our turning back from fleeing and our basically taking charge of the situation. It's not really that complicated. It's not rocket science. It's really a matter of saying to the men of Ai, looky here, smoke rising from your city. And the people of Ai will go, oh, you outfoxed us. And now we've got no place to hide. We got no place to flee to any longer. And it's kind of like point out the cross and say, okay, forces of darkness, you received a mighty blow when Christ suffered on the cross. Okay, forces of darkness, when Christ rose from the dead, it's kind of like he blew a big hole in the side of your kingdom. Now there are others that are going to be escaping and going free. I just want to point out the cross. I just want to point out the resurrection. And that spells defeat to you. You know that, don't you? It's kind of like the wonders done by somebody else is to be pointed out in a rather matter-of-fact way. You know, you don't have to shout in a mighty warrior's voice or anything. Just say, hey, on the basis of that, shall we say, that big new reality that's rising up from your city, why, I will now move forward, and I will urge you to give back the captives. Let's imagine that some Israelites had been taken captive in the city of Ai and held down in a dungeon. Well, it's kind of like burst forth now with this new reality of this smoke that is rising against the sky. We read, Israel did carry off from Ai the livestock and plunder of this city, as the Lord had instructed Joshua. They couldn't take plunder from Jericho. When they did so, they suffered a mighty defeat in Ai. But now, in a measured way, there can be some plunder taken from this next city, and that's what was happening. Israel did carry off for themselves the livestock and plunder of this city, as the Lord had instructed Joshua. You can read all about it, Joshua chapter 8. That's verse 27. And so to some extent, we can plunder the kind of like the prison house of darkness. We can plunder the barracks that had all those enemy soldiers in there, because of course on the basis of that, shall we say, new reality that, shall we say, it can be seen across the sky, against the sky. That's the huge game changer. Do you understand the game changer in this whole thing about the fight between the darkness and the light in this world? You understand it all has to do Christ dying in shameful darkness, but then being raised in glorious light. It's kind of like on the basis of that, why the enemy is going to flee in humiliation, and God's people are going to move forward, surging forward, like on D-Day with the Allies landing on the shores of Normandy, surging forward. Oh, I'm telling you, that's our task, is basically to point out crucial game changer and then move forward on the basis of it, and go forward with strength and with power. So many lose sight of that big game changer, and they fail to bring it up. But let us not lose sight of it, and let us not fail to bring it up. It's kind of like on the basis of that one grand thing, we can move forward, and the enemy can feel kind of like the loss of its power. Once again, it says in verse 20, the men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising against the sky, but they had no chance to escape in any direction. For the Israelites, who had been fleeing toward the desert, had turned back against their pursuers. And when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city, and that smoke was going out from the city, they turned around and they went forward against Ai, and they captured Ai. We capture on the basis of a rather public display of the loss of the kingdom of darkness and the triumph of the kingdom of light. May we know what our basis is for moving forward. Enemy must flee. This has been Bible Study.
Journey through and rediscover life-changing truths by unlocking Galatians again. Unlocking Galatians again is a verse-by-verse journey through the New Testament's book of Galatians. Discover what it means to walk by faith and in the power of God's Spirit. Caution, this book can cause a burst of renewal and change the way we preach and care for the spiritual needs of others. To find this book, go to ZulonPress.com or call 1-866-909-2665.